Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm here with Mr. Dan Ruby from Invest Durham. Dan is the Manager of Business Development and Investment, and very excited to have Dan here today to talk to us a little bit about entrepreneurship, some of his own personal journey, and some of the opportunities that we can find here in Durham region. Dan, thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to have you here, and we've spoken for a long time over some of the opportunities, but I'm really excited for you to share some of the journeys that you've had, not just in Durham region, but throughout your experience as an entrepreneur. So first of all, thank you for coming here.
Thank you for inviting me here today, and very happy to be here.
So just with the team, we've been doing a little bit of research, and we found out that you started entrepreneurship when you were, or got into your first venture when you were 17. That's exciting. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, I was back in high school. To understand this reference, you're going to have to be my age or older.
Okay.
But they used to call me Duty Kravitz.
Oh, yes, I am familiar.
There's an old Mordecai Richler book called The Apprenticeship of Duty Kravitz.
Yes.
And that's because I was kind of an entrepreneurial spirit at a young age. And so at the age of 17, I started my first company, and it was called Sports Nut.
Okay.
And so I used to have, my business was run out of my parents' bedroom in my parents' house.
Yeah.
And I had a great big freezer in my bedroom. So not too many kids had freezers, like full-size chest freezers in their bedroom. And in that freezer I kept, it wasn't turned on, it was just a clean storage place.
Right.
And I kept all kinds of nuts, big boxes of nuts. And I used to shop at a store called John Vince Foods.
Okay.
I don't even know if they're still around, but back then you could buy in bulk. You could buy, pistachios and cashews and trail mix and jujubes and things like that. And I used to go and I'd buy them in bulk. I'd buy big boxes of them. And I had a scale, and I had little bags made up.
Yeah.
And I had little labels made up that said Sports Nut on them.
Yeah.
And the weight that I would weigh for each different product type. And I had little racks made up, little metal racks that you would poke the product that would hang on the racks.
Oh, yes.
And nice. I would take those racks to sports clubs.
Yeah.
Like, tennis clubs, racket clubs, gyms, and sell that product at their snack bar or their
awesome.
on-site bar.
Yeah.
And they would keep the product behind the bar and sell it over the counter for me. So that was my first entrepreneurial endeavor.
That's amazing.
At 17, yeah.
That's amazing. Great name, great branding.
Yeah.
You had the distribution laid out. What inspired you to get into that?
That's a great question. I think, entrepreneurialism to a certain extent is part of your personality matrix, right? You either have that kind of personality or you don't. But I think part of the credit belongs to credit. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but part of the reason, let's put it that way, it's a little more humbly, is my father. He was never an entrepreneur. Well, he eventually was, and I'll get into that. But in my early youth, he was a sheet metal worker.
Okay.
So he always worked for different companies, and he would install heating and air conditioning equipment, usually heavy-duty industrial type stuff, rooftop equipment, and running similar to this facility here, the diffusers and the ducts above the T-bar ceilings and all of that. So that's what he did for a living. And he always said, as I was growing up, he always said that you should become self-employed. That his belief in life was that those that were most successful and most happy were those that were self-employed. So he instilled that in me at a very young age. Like I heard that many times from him. Yeah. So that partly might have been the reason. I'm not really sure. It might have just been an innate personality trait that I had.
Yeah.
So that was my first endeavor, and I did a couple other interesting things. And
so what happened with it?
Well, Sportsnet kind of. I guess a typical entrepreneur, right? You like to build things,
Yeah.
and entrepreneurs tend to their excitement comes from the building of something,
Correct.
from
yeah.
the innovation of the initial activity.
Yeah.
They're not so great at managing things,
Yeah.
right? And so after the business or what have you is built, oftentimes an entrepreneur will hand it off
Yes.
to someone with very different personality traits
Yes.
that are good at managing and like managing and maintaining a business.
Yeah.
So for me, as a 17-year-old, started off with a bang, had all this excitement, built up a bunch of organizations that were selling my product. And then, of course, you get into some of the challenges, right?
Right.
In terms of collecting the money
Yes.
and the luster kind of just wore off,
Yes.
to be honest. So I kind of just let it die on the vine.
Yeah.
And the second opportunity was part of a new shiny object.
Yeah.
Appeared in my my vision, and I think the new shiny object replaced Sportsnet. The other part of it too is, believe it or not, Don Cherry got into the game, and
Oh, really?
and
Okay.
he competed in the space, and that was kind of when I decided, okay, we're out of this space.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had something back then called Grape Nut.
Okay.
Yeah, because
I think your name was
his
better, but-
nickname was Grapes.
Okay. Okay. Oh, interesting. I think your name was better, like more.
More appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate. First of all, it resonates for me being an entrepreneur. What you talked about, understanding your space within business. That innovation part, and I think different entrepreneurs have different talents, but what you shared really resonates. There's that innovation part, that excitement. For some people, for others, the excitement is the management, et cetera, of it.
Right.
But definitely, your sport nut story resonates for me. I at an early age had something inside me. I mean, my father was an entrepreneur, but had something inside me that kind of pushed me, or inspired is like a pull. This was kind of like a push. I think I just kind of had to do this. It was nature. So it's very interesting that you had that journey. I totally didn't know that, but it kind of connecting some dots here, which is great. I think that's wonderful that you got into entrepreneurship at an early age, and now you're in this space of innovation and growth. But let me kind of dig into something else that you talked about in one of the articles that you were featured in, and that is your specialty of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, and building these collaborative networks. I mean, you and I have had conversations about that off of this podcast. What's your take on entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, and these collaborative networks?
So that's a big question. So I mentioned the entrepreneur's passion for starting up companies.
Yes.
It's quite true that I'm specific. I'm talking about a very specific type of entrepreneur when I make that generalization. My experience in terms of small business, anyway, is not the same as that generalization. I find probably 80% of small business owners. Well, actually, let me take a step up a level first.
Sure.
I would say that there are 3 pillars to every business. So if you think about a 3-legged stool, if you kick out any one of those legs, the stool is going to fall over. If you ignore any one of these 3 pillars, the business will fail. And I find that entrepreneurs come from all 3 pillars. And about 80% come from the operational pillar. And so what I mean by that is they're the master craftsman. They're the tradesman that has learned a skill, learned a trade, worked in the industry for a good portion of their lives, and then decide to go out on their own. And eventually my father did that in the heating and air conditioning space. But I'd say about 15% of business owners come from the financial pillar, which is the second pillar of business. You've got to have a good, firm handle on the numbers and the finances and, the books. And so those would be the accountant types that don't necessarily have the knowledge of the industry or the business that they're in, right? But they know the numbers. So that's an example of that is the accountant who's running a heating and air conditioning business, but running it from the financial perspective.
Right.
And then about 5% of businesses, and these are my numbers, so they're made up. But
Okay.
this is my lived experience, and
Yeah,
you
sure.
know how I assess what I've seen. I would say about 5% of business owners are from the sales marketing pillar. And so those, again, not necessarily the industry, do they have the expertise? They may not have the expertise in financing, but what they really know is how to sell. And what's interesting is all three of those pillars are absolutely necessary.
Right.
And I would say to an equal perspective. But a very minor percentage of people are actually have that sales marketing expertise and lead the company from that perspective. But I would also say that those sales marketers generally are the ones that bring the companies to mega success. So those are the Steve Jobs of the world that have that innate sales marketing ability. So for me, I had tried a series of businesses. I mentioned the Sports Nut. At 19, I bought a school bus.
Oh, wow.
And I converted it into a chip truck.
Into a chip truck?
A chip truck, yeah. So
like selling potato chips or what?
Selling French fries and burgers and,
Oh,
and
okay.
wings.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. So we put a couple of fryers in. We put a grill in.
Wow.
Sink and a fridge, and sold French fries and burgers.
Yeah, nice.
So that was a second stab at my Duty Kravitz nature.
Yeah.
And then what happened for me was this is where my father became a self-employed person. He saw the entrepreneurial spirit in me, and he said, "Let's open a heating and air conditioning company." And so we did that together.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and I think I was about 21 when we did that. And we got up to about 10 employees. And then at the age of 28, I had what I call my quarter life crisis.
Okay.
I know that's probably a little later than quarter life, but that's what I call it.
Sure.
And the reason that happened is we were, this was I'm going to age myself here, but this was around 94. And society was going through a very steep recession, particularly in construction. And this was, Bob Ray was in power, and you remember the Ray days. I don't know if you remember, if you're probably not old enough, but
I remember it was a challenging time.
it was a
in the
challenging time,
90s, yeah.
especially for construction. And we were giving 120-day terms on our jobs. So do the work today and pay me
Wow.
120 days later. And so what was happening is, and what happened in the end is, I got shafted for a $50,000 contract.
Wow.
And back then, I was still renting. And for perspective, when I finally bought my first house, I paid $129,000 for my first house.
Wow.
So $50,000 was like
huge
one
amount,
third of a home back then. Anyway, the quarter life crisis was I came to the conclusion that self-employment was dog eat dog and swim with the sharks, and that I was too nice a guy to survive in self-employment endeavors. And so at the age of 28, I started university and shifted gears. And when I went, I was going to become a lawyer, and I was going to right the wrongs of society. The personal experiences that I'd had in not getting paid, and
Yes.
all of that, I was going to go right those wrongs. But I ended up enjoying my career, my time at university. I went to the University of Toronto, and then when I came out of university, the first opportunity I had, significant job that was offered to me was working with youth at risk, to help them start businesses.
Oh,
And it was
interesting.
because my prior experience at school was all business related.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, my fourth company, I started when I started university to get me through school,
Okay.
and that was called student vending.
Okay.
And so I had a vending business, and out here I had the Nokia plant. I had 5 or 6 machines in that plant, and
Vending machines.
vending machines. Yeah. So kind of going back to my roots in
That's awesome.
in Sports Nut, except now I had machines, physical
Yeah.
machines.
Yeah.
And,
It's a great,
put
it
the
was a
product-
great business, vending machines.
Well, it was great for a student because I
Yeah.
could go and fill them up around my classes, and
Yeah.
I could do it on my own time. But coming out of university, I first opportunity was in economic development. I never chose it, but it was the right fit for me in terms of my background in self-employment. And so I taught youth a 34-week program on business planning and all the different aspects of doing a business plan, because I'd done them over the years in the various businesses. The one mistake that I made four consecutive times, which ties into my earlier conversation about entrepreneurs, is I was not that operations guy. I didn't pick something that I was the master craftsman in. I just found a shiny object,
Right.
and thought, let's try that, right? Let's try Sportsnut. Let's try chip truck. Dad's in here eating an air conditioning. Let's try that.
Right.
Right? Student vending, same thing. It just seemed to be something I could do and to make ends meet. So advice there, I guess, for other entrepreneurs would be take the time to look at yourself first and do something that you know that you have the innate skills and abilities to do, and that you can really craft for yourself. I know I'm taking a long time to get to the answer to your question.
No, that's
But
okay.
coming out of university, I got a job in economic development. I was teaching kids business planning, and then offered another opportunity at the same economic development organization to run youth councils. And so I went from working with youth at risk and helping them start businesses and earn a living on their own,
Right.
to working with the other end of the spectrum, kids that were gifted, and they were in all the gifted programs, and they were on student council, and they were mayor youth councils and all of that, and working with them to make a difference in their communities. So, for example, one of the communities was raising funds. They wanted a skate park in their community, so they did
Okay.
a lot of different events. And I took 27 kids to Ottawa, and we shared the stage with Justin Trudeau many years ago. And some of those kids today are
Pierre? Justin,
Justin.
because when he was younger. Oh,
before he
wow.
was a politician.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so he was
Nice.
big in the youth scene back then. And,
Right.
and some of those kids are now in politics today. They went on to be, I'm not going to name who they are, but
Sure.
they've made careers for themselves, quite significant careers. But I tell you all that because your question was about, well, you had multifaceted entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, and collaborative networks. So what I'm heading to here is the collaborative network piece. And I learned how to build collaborative networks through that youth council experience.
Right.
Because what I learned in working with the youth councils was the councils had to be the voice of youth. They couldn't be my voice. And so my job was to keep them safe, sign the contracts that needed to be signed, be the parent, if you will, on
Sure.
some of the things they wanted to do, and say, well, wait a minute, have you thought about this and have you thought about that? But allow them their voice at the table.
Right.
And in moving forward throughout my economic development career, I've taken that perspective in all of the collaborative endeavors that I've been able to accomplish, meaning having the partners make a real contribution, giving them a real voice in the collaborative network at the table, and not playing the supportive role, right? Being willing to listen, to being open to collaboration and playing that supportive role. On the topic of entrepreneurship, I would say I have taken my entrepreneurial innate nature from when I was a kid, and I've been able to fulfill that need, that purpose, right? Everybody needs to feel purpose in the work that they do.
Absolutely.
I've been able to fulfill it through entrepreneurship. And so there's been a series of entrepreneurial endeavors that I've been able to accomplish. They've all been collaborative endeavors through my work career, but it's essentially creating innovation within your work environment. Now, in my work environment, for the past 20 plus years, that's been either municipal or provincial or economic development.
Right.
Right, and so it's building innovative approaches to economic development, innovative collaborative approaches that fulfill that entrepreneurship need, right? So rather than entrepreneurship, you're creating clusters. I've kind of found that the path that I've headed down is really recognizing the value of cluster development and getting people to work together. It's the collective brain power of a collaborative network can exponentially outdo what you can do on your own. And leveraging those networks has been key to the success that I've had in economic development.
Yeah, I think a lot of great insights there. Not taking away from your vending machine and your entrepreneurial journey, but that collaborative approach, I think, is quite essential. And I think some young entrepreneurs or people getting into the entrepreneurial landscape, or I think just generally, even in work life, going in your career, I think people don't understand that as much. It's one thing to have do all this hard work, create a great product and service, but getting that distribution out for people hearing that, it's one thing for you to do that, but if you have advocates for you, I think that helps tremendously, and opens doors to markets or opportunities you might not have even thought about. Did you have a lot of mentors or people that guided you through this journey, Dan?
I have had some key, I would say, mentors along the way. It's funny, at the time, you don't necessarily recognize that
Yes.
or recognize them.
Yes.
It's in hindsight that you recognize who your mentors were, at least for me. Obviously at first it was my dad in driving the message of entrepreneurialism, even though it never stuck with me in the end.
Sure.
I'm a bureaucrat.
Sure.
I may be an entrepreneurial bureaucrat, but I'm still a bureaucrat. I chose the safety of a role in government over the risky path of being an entrepreneur.
Sure.
Always. A few years back, I used to work more with small companies and businesses, and small self-employed people, and I would always give them credit for the courage that it takes to be self-employed, right? And taking that leap. Always give people credit for that. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was your question?
I don't think that there was really a question. I think I was just talking about mentors.
Mentors, yes,
And
that was your question.
if you've had many,
Yeah.
and you mentioned your father.
So early days, my father, my uncle. I have an uncle who he's the most successful person in our family, and I was able to leverage his. He's an accountant, but he did quite well for himself in the accounting space. He was a VP at Barclays and a CEO of a few different large credit card processing companies, and so he did very well for himself. And the student vending endeavor that I talked about, we were partners in that.
Oh,
student
great!
vending,
Yeah.
So he worked with me on that. So he was certainly a early mentor of mine. And then throughout my work career, I've had some really key employers. My first job in economic development was with the CEO of the. I worked for a community future development corporation up in Simcoe County, and the lady that ran the place, her name was Valerie Ryan.
Okay.
And she taught me, all of the skills that I continue to use in building collaborative networks really came from her. She mentored me a great deal in terms of how to manage the youth councils, and she was a wonderful lady. And then moving through my career, different bosses, different directors of ECDev. Used to run a program for a small business enterprise center that I managed at one time called Summer Company. And as part of that program, I had a board of mentors so the kids would come in and learn how to start businesses, but I would match them up with about a dozen community leaders that would work with them and mentor them.
Right.
And some of those folks actually became my mentors as well along the way. Great people.
You mentioned that sometimes or most times you don't realize that
You don't.
they're your mentors till
Yeah.
later. Do you think there could have been a better way for you to prepare for that mentorship, or do you think the organic approach was the way to go?
Um, yeah, that's a hard thing to say. In my experience, it's been organic.
Yeah.
And now I've reached the stage of my life where I'm more the mentor than I am the mentee. And there are several people that I consider mentees that I interact with on a regular basis that, they continue to ask for that mentorship and advice, and I'm happy to give it and happy to do it.
I've always found it when it's so formal, it's very tough for me, because I think the formality of it is a challenge for me. Whereas when it's happened organically, because your comment of, I've had some quite a number of mentors in my life, but didn't take that formal approach of, people have approached me, I'd like you to be my mentor.
Yes, I've had
And
that too.
I kind of shied away from that responsibility, because it is a
Right.
responsibility. However, other people who have kind of like, it's just time,
Yes. That is
spending
the
time
big.
with someone, right?
That is it. Yeah.
Yeah, and these questions or comments kind of organically come when you're having a coffee. Or I used to, for 2 years straight, had someone that I met for breakfast every Friday morning, who was near my house, and he was much older, but a key player in the optometry industry, and I absolutely loved it. We had no formal agenda on the table. He would kind of follow up and ask me how things were going. And I never once said, "Can you be my mentor?" He never once said,
Right.
we just kind of kept the breakfast going every Friday. So I think, it ties into that collaborative approach, and mentors can also open doors for you. I'm thinking about a lot of our students at Computek who may be watching this as well, looking for how to connect with someone that might be a guide for them as they look for their career, or perhaps entrepreneur opportunities, business opportunities. But let me lean into a little bit of Invest Durham.
Sure, but
Dan.
let me give you one comment on that
Sure, please,
mentoring
yeah.
piece that your students, I think, might benefit from.
Sure.
Because now I do have very specific requests. Will you be my mentor?
Right.
Type of asks, and my response to that is always more casual. In that, yes, but just call me anytime, and I'll
Yeah.
make time. Where I can fit the time in, I'll make the time for you.
Right.
Those that are getting more mentoring from me than others are smart enough to learn what Dan's schedule is and make the call at the right time.
Right.
So, for example, on my way home from my drive after work, because I'm just in the car, I'm hands-free,
Yeah.
I can give you all the time in the world,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So, to the students out there that are looking for mentors, be a little persistent and be a little creative, because the mentors that you're asking for advice from generally are busy people.
Right.
For me, prior to taking my job at Invest Durham, my recent job that we'll come to now, I sat on 6 boards.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
That's a
Plus, I've coached hockey for 13 years,
right.
and I have 3 sons, and I've coached at certain points of that time frame. I coached all 3 of their teams,
Wow.
head
yeah.
coach,
Wow.
and sat on 6 boards. Since coming to Durham Region, I have significantly reduced my board commitment. And as you said, it's time. I just don't have the time, right?
Right.
So I've resigned from several boards. I still sit on 2 or 3 of them, and soon that 3 is going to be 2. I'm coming to the end of my term on one of them, and already let them know I'm not, I'm not re-upping, because it's a time thing, right?
Yes,
And
yeah.
unfortunately, as well, as you get a little older, you don't have the energy you had when you were younger.
Sure. Sure.
So I find that now I do need naps. So so if you really want that support and advice, you need to make the initiative, make the effort, chase them down, and find what works for their schedule, right? And then you'll be more successful in it.
So as you're being more careful with your time, you took this opportunity at Invest Durham. What excited you about this opportunity, Durham in particular?
That's a great question. So there's two parts of that answer. One is a personal component, and the other is a career component.
Okay.
So I've spent, prior to, I joined Durham Region in September of this year for the role that I'm in. The previous 7 years, I was working at the Ontario Centre of Innovation. And the last 3 of those years, my title was Sector Manager for the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network. So we've talked about collaborative endeavors, and I could go back in time and tell you about a bunch of other things, but most recently, the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network is a collaborative network across Ontario with 7 hubs, with 12 nodes in those 7 hubs, ranging from Windsor to Ottawa. Durham is part of that, and most recently, 6-node network up in Northern Ontario. And this whole network collaborates together to position Ontario as a leader in the future of mobility.
Okay.
Started off as AVIN, the Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network, under a previous government, and then was so successful under the Ford government, it was rebranded to OVIN and re-upped and broadened in terms of scope, because at one time it was really about autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles, and now it's about electrification and critical minerals and all things that are really happening well for Ontario right now. And you see the announcements with Volkswagen and Stellantis and so on. That's kind of a significant focus area for the future of Ontario's economy. And so I was heavily, knee deep in the OVIN network, building the network. The most recent network up in the north, I led the development of that collaborative hub. In early stages, I was part of it as well. And so I had a good, still have a good, firm understanding of the future of vehicles and transportation, and significant understanding pan-Ontario of what we have to offer in terms of the companies that are here and the research and development hubs that are here, like the ACE facility we have in our backyard. So I had that firm understanding. What I recognized when I saw the opportunity in Durham Region is that Durham is right now in a blessed position. It's a once in a generational opportunity. So that's number one. I took on the role because I thought it could be accomplished. I think it's entirely achievable. And so what do I mean by that? Durham Region provides over 30%, I think it's 37% of the province's electricity.
Right, yeah.
We've got OPG here in our backyard. There's a new initiative in small modular reactors in the nuclear space that is going to be a global leading initiative.
That's at Clarington, I think.
Correct.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that's driving the demand for energy, I would say the main thing, is automotive. And if we're going to if transportation is going to move to electric, we're going to need to double or even triple our grid capacity over the next 20, 30 years. Durham Region is already providing a significant chunk of Ontario's power and has some emerging opportunities and technologies that are right here in our backyard. Now, on top of that, we have a long history in automotive. Right, the first car company in Canada was here in Oshawa. Right, used to be a carriage company.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
McLaughlin.
Okay.
They built horse and buggy carriages.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that became GM Canada. And so, with over 100-year automotive history, there's a supply chain that's built up around that. So we've got the supply chain for automotive, and we've got the supply chain with OPG here, and Darlington, and what's happening in Clarington. We've got the energy supply chain as well.
Right.
And so what we're seeing moving into the future is the intersection
Right.
of those two sectors of that supply chain. And so what I believe is the Durham region is poised to be a global player in that space.
Mm.
I think we can be an electron valley instead of a silicon valley if we do things right, and we can encourage the growth of companies in that space. We can encourage companies to move in that are innovating in energy and and next gen automotive. So I see a real significant opportunity. On top of that, it all starts from a federal perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You got to look at Canada first. And what I mean by that is, my experience is Canada is the best country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, that's easy for me to say. I'm a Canadian, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously that's biased. But I've been around in different parts of the world, and from my perspective, we have the best, the safest, most secure country in the world. When I go travel, I see graffiti, I see homelessness, I
Mm-hmm.
see strife. You see all that here, but not as much.
Right.
To me, Canada has it together more than any other nation.
Mm-hmm.
The only drawback we have is weather. So
Yes.
if you can get through the winters here, you got it pretty good in Canada,
Yes.
right? We've got the social safety net. The people are respectable. Our education levels are very high.
Mm-hmm.
We have nature. We've got space. You go
Mhm.
into other parts of the world, and there's no space.
Yes.
Right?
Very true.
The wide open space here is a dream for most parts of most countries. So it starts with Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at Ontario being the economic engine of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So we're the most significant province, and have always been, or maybe not have always been. You might argue Quebec, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly for quite some time. And then Toronto, of course, is the economic engine of Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And Toronto speaks for itself. I don't
Mhm.
think I need to sell anything on
Right.
Toronto. It's just booming, and I think every part of the globe has heard the name Toronto, maybe even more than Canada. So why I say all that is we border Toronto,
Yes.
and so we can leverage all of that, all of the advantages that come from all of that, and you can still afford to live here,
Mm.
and there's still space here.
Yes.
And there's still opportunities to open up shop here and
Mhm.
open up businesses, versus Toronto. You're going up into the clouds, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
about it. So there's opportunity from a bordering Toronto perspective, but moreover, there's sector-specific opportunities that I think Durham is really well poised to capitalize on.
Is that your term, Electron Valley?
It is not my term. It's a term I heard recently that I've adopted.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Official term is Canada's clean energy capital.
Right.
That's what Invest Durham is branding Durham region, which is a nice fit. But there's, in terms of getting the messaging out there for the vision, I think Electron Valley is a good term.
Mm. I like it. It sounds
yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, I've also heard Ontario's powerhouse.
Okay.
Durham region is Ontario's powerhouse.
Okay. Nice.
That's a fit as well.
I think the clean energy is a great focus, absolutely. I'd like to kind of close off on looking at businesses that are coming into Durham region and what advice you would offer them. I mean, you've definitely laid out some great opportunities in terms of Durham region. Is there any advice you would give in terms of anyone within Canada or foreign direct investment coming into Canada, collaborative approaches, who to connect with, or things that they should look out for?
Sure. I mean, we could talk for hours, frankly. So you're getting a little snippet, but it depends on the company, of course. There is a lot of people that are not leveraging what's out there, and they don't. A lot of people, like, shockingly, after a 20-year career, there's still a lot of people out there that don't even know what's out there.
Right.
They don't know what they don't know. And they don't know what the support networks are.
Mm-hmm.
But the support networks are tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
They're tremendous. The government of Ontario, for at least 35 years, has done a significant job. And the fact that, Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area is number 2 to Silicon Valley globally in terms of tech startups is not by accident. It was an intentional endeavor by several successive governments in Ontario, right? Not even one party deserves the credit. I left an organization, OC, it was called Ontario Centers of Excellence, became known as Ontario Center of Innovation, 35 years old. 35 years ago, there were 7 separate centers of excellence designed to help different sectors and tech companies, develop their technologies. And the funding that has been there over the 35 years, and sometimes it comes and sometimes it goes, and some sectors are present and other times it's not. And Ontario has been funding regional innovation centers for many years, for at least 13, 14 years. These are places where companies and startups can go and get mentorship and get support and get access to the funding channels that are also out there that they don't know about, like the OCIs, like the IRAPs of the world.
Right.
And the key is the from my perspective, after a 20-plus year career in this space, I think the most valuable piece you can give someone is a connection, is a business-to-business connection.
Okay. Yeah.
And a sales opportunity, a sales pipeline.
Right.
And so part of that, a key strategy I honed in on almost 10 years ago when I was working for the city of Vaughan. We were building something then called the VIC, the Vaughan International Commercialization Center.
Okay.
And I was branding, one of the pillars of that program was Test City. And I was looking for opportunities for international companies to test their technologies in a North American context. And so we were bringing in partners, like the city itself was a partner. Canada's Wonderland was a partner. CN Rail was a partner. The power company was a partner. So different, and these were all Vaughan-centric, right? Was working for the city at the time. But the point is that the value is in helping you to commercialize your technology and providing the opportunity to pilot the technology so that you can verify its effectiveness, and then you can go to the market and say, look, they used it, it went well, they loved it, you should too, assuming the pilot went well, of course.
Yeah.
Another reason I took the job in Durham Region, going back to that question, was when I was working under Oven, part of our funding streams, and so again, many years later, the concept became mainstream, and the value of the concept was very much recognized. To get a grant through Oven, and we had $1 million grants, and they still do, you had to have what we called a primary partner. So you'd have a tech company that had a new emerging technology, right? Could be a connected vehicle technology, it could be an intelligent transportation system, what have you, some subcomponent.
Right.
But in order to get the funding, we wanted to know that there was a viable market channel for you. So you needed to have a somewhat significant partner that would be part of your demonstration project to verify the veracity of the technology that you were demonstrating. And when you're talking about intelligent transportation systems, oftentimes the customer for that technology is the municipality because they own the roads.
Right.
And so when I was working for the province under Oven, my job was to make these deals happen, to find the companies, connect them to the partners, fund the demonstration of the project, as well as work with the network, the broader network that I described earlier from Windsor to the north to Ottawa. But in so doing, what I tracked was that Durham Region was the most innovative municipality. And why do I know that? How can I say that? Because they did 5 or 6 projects with Durham Region Transit. The second highest number was a little town of Innisfil. They did 2.
Oh.
Every other municipality did 1. Well, I shouldn't say like they didn't all do one, but Toronto did 1, and Hamilton did 1, and lots of municipalities did a project. But Durham did 5 or 6.
Wow.
right? So that told me that there was an innovative mindset
Right.
at Durham Region. And that was another thing that pulled me in, realizing that we could actually get things accomplished here. There's an opportunity in Durham that I think is surpasses the opportunity anywhere else in Ontario. And I think the opportunity in Ontario surpasses anywhere else in the globe. So what I'm saying is the opportunity in Durham surpasses anywhere else in the globe.
Yes.
And on top of that, you've got a receptive municipal structure that's willing to pilot innovative technologies. The Whitby Shuttle project is an example of that. Like, not too many municipalities would take the gamble on an autonomous shuttle, right? I mean,
Right,
sure, it's
yeah.
been done around the globe, but that's only one of 6 projects that the Durham region did. And that continues, by the way.
Yeah.
There's challenge statements going out, at least 3 a year, from Durham Region Transit to solve traffic-related issues, safety-related issues, and so on.
Right. Right.
But the opportunity that we have is to broaden that beyond just those transportation-related issues into solving the electrification challenges that we're going to have, right? Energy storage. How are we going to get the grid capacity? How are we going to get the vehicles charged? Is it going to be lithium-ion batteries? Is it going to be hydrogen?
Right.
Right? So all of those technologies are emerging right now, and the globe is going to need them. The globe's decided.
Yeah.
It's not if we're moving to electrification
Yeah.
of transportation. It's when.
Yeah.
The ICE engine is dead. Oil and gas is dead. That's a fact. The world's moved past it. And so that positions Durham in such a privileged position right now. And so why wouldn't I jump into that opportunity?
Yes. Yeah. Exciting times, and I think exciting for any business that's looking to grow and scale. So we might have to do a part 2 on another day, Dan, because as you said, there's so many exciting things, so many things that you can talk about. And but I want to thank you for this opportunity on coming on our podcast. If anyone wants to follow up with Invest Durham and see some of the things that Invest Durham is doing, we'll put the links of the website there for folks who want to follow up. But thank you very much to our guest today, Mr. Dan Ruby, who is the Manager of Business Development and Investment at Invest Durham. And again, if you have any questions or comments, please put them on the video that you see here, or check out the links that we have on the video. And thank you very much for joining us, Dan, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.